Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today is the one and only son of martial arts founder Jimmy Webster. He started training at a young age and earned his black belt at age 14. He held the title of Alabama State Champion for 5 years in a row from 85 through 1990. In 93, he attacked the national tournament circuit, and in 94, won first place in 10 national tournaments in a row. In 95, became one of the many stars of a TV show that you've all heard me talk many times about on this show, WMAC Masters. And in 97, he took over the family studio from his dad. The school has produced over 200 black belts, 30 state champions, and 7 national champions. He's been happily married for 23 years, has 4 children and 5 grandchildren, and his favorite pastime is shooting pool. Please welcome my guest today, Jamie Great Wolf Webster. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for taking the time. I truly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
What we like to do, I want to go back to the very beginning. I'm assuming it's something to do with your dad, but I'd like to hear just where did that first spark come from, that first interest, and kind of what kicked off your martial arts journey?
Okay, so my dad began training. Well, let me back up a little bit. So in 1965, before I was born, my dad was like 15 years old. He had a motorcycle wreck, and it broke his pelvis, and it hurt him pretty bad. He was in the hospital for like 44 days.
Wow.
And he was on crutches for like a year and a half. And his doctor said, well, hey, we're going to have to do something to get you off of these crutches. Like you need to get into something to exercise your hips. And my dad said, like what? And the guy said, well, maybe try martial arts. And that was very new to our area in the 60s. So my dad started taking martial arts in 1967 before I was born. So when I was probably 3 years old, he opened the first studio in our town. There was martial arts offered in other places like at rec centers and things like that. But he kind of opened the first brick and mortar school in town in Decatur, Alabama in 1973. So I was kind of born around martial arts, going to tournaments and things like that. And I kind of officially started training when I was 5. Probably didn't last maybe a year. There was no kids classes for 5-year-olds back then. And he would just take me with him to the adult class. Oh, wow. And I didn't really like it. I mean, he would hold the bag for me and I would practice kicks and things. But, when you're 5 years old and you're having to pair up with a grown man to do self-defense or something, it just wasn't fun for me. And I'm sure it wasn't fun for the adult who was practicing with me. And so I probably trained about a year and then just, didn't keep training. But then when I was about 9, I started getting bullied by a guy named Richie. And this kid used to chase me home from school, and I'd have to jump the fence and run home and jump the fence and sprain my ankle and limp home. And he would laugh. And when probably a few months after that, me and a buddy of mine, Steve, we were at a 7-Eleven, getting a Coke and a candy bar and playing Pac-Man or whatever. And as we walked out, there was Richie with like 4 of his buddies. And a lot of them were a lot older than us. And we just went right back into the store. Like I was afraid, we were going to get jumped and beaten up. So go back in the store, and I called my dad, and he was up at the store like in 1 minute, it seemed like. And as soon as he got out and slammed the door of that truck, those, 5 boys, they just scattered. And on the way home, my dad's like, he dropped Steve off first. And then on the way home, he goes, you ever think about getting back into class? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start Monday. And so I started and never stopped.
Wow.
So, if I hadn't been bullied, I wouldn't gotten back into, maybe I would have gotten into karate. I don't know if it would have been my career, but, I got back into martial arts, started training, and went to my first tournament as like a 10-year-old white belt, and pretty lucky. I only had like my first tournament down in Mobile, only had like 3 kids in my division. But I was pretty fortunate. I got first in forms and first in sparring. And so I kind of got the bug of, wanting to compete. And so I started competing, and, 5 years later as a black belt, I was, state champion and did that, and then competed nationally. I won the Battle of Atlanta in like the junior black belt division when I was like 15, and, then went on to compete in NASCA, and I had a really good year in '94 and got scouted for the TV show. And sometimes I tell my students the story of how I got back into martial arts, being bullied by Richie. And so when I moved to the house I'm in now, I had some neighbors move in. This has probably even just like 5 years ago. And the neighbor was asking me, like, how did you get into karate? And so I told him about, how my dad had the motorcycle accident and how he got into karate, and then how I got into karate. I was bullied by this guy named Richie and everything. And he said, is it Richie's, so-and-so? He said his last name. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, I think I know him. He said, is he about your age? And I said, yeah. And he said, I think I know him. And I said, well, I tell you what, I said, invite him over to the house for a game of pool. I want to talk to him. And so Richie came over. I told him the story, and he says, man, I apologize. I didn't even remember bullying you. I said, man, I was so afraid of you. I said, without, you scaring me, I probably wouldn't have gotten back into martial arts. I wouldn't have become a state champion or a national champion. I wouldn't have been on a television series. I said, I want to thank you for, a lot of people wouldn't think like that, I guess, to, thank their bully. But if I hadn't, got into that, he said, man, I don't even remember bullying you. I said, well, it's just, I said, you are the Richie that grew up like around, like on 6th Avenue next to Westwood Drive, and went to Brookhaven Middle School. And he's like, yeah, that's me. And I said, well, that was you then. I said, you had me really scared. And he said, I don't even remember that. He said, I do remember that particular year. He said, my father passed away, and he said, I had a mentally challenged brother that I had to take care of. Well, my mom had to work like 3 jobs. And so I said, look, you were probably frustrated and lashing out. You lost your dad and taking care of your brother. I said, I don't blame you. I said, matter of fact, I thank you for, giving me such a great career. But I said, because if you hadn't bullied me, I wouldn't have been back into martial arts. So I really, it was good seeing him again. And he's a pretty good pool player, by the way. So it all worked out. It all worked out.
Wow,
say that.
What a story. Now, what style was that? What style did your dad teach?
Okay, so my dad when he first joined, he trained in Jungmukwan Taekwondo with a guy, Master One Young Chung. And then in about 74, 75, I was probably, just right before I started school, like first grade, Master Chung moved away. And so by the time I started taking at age, like really getting serious about karate when I was age 10, my dad, when his instructor moved, my dad switched over from Taekwondo to a Tang Sudo,
okay,
with a master Youngju Lee, who had trained in Korea under the Kwajanem Wang Ki, which is one of the instructors that was over Chuck Norris when Chuck Norris was testing in Korea. So under J.C. Shin. So, I just my dad he had a black belt in Taekwondo, but he also, had a rank in the Tang Sudo. So I never ranked in Taekwondo, but my primary style was Tang Sudo.
Okay. So then think back then when you joined back up after taking a few years off, you were 10. Obviously you got back into it because you were being bullied. Once you were in it, what made you want to stick with it? What was it about it that drew you into it and made you want to keep going?
My dad had a really good example for karate. He wasn't just, I was pretty much a forms guy, but my dad was more into the fighting part. He trained a lot of guys, not just in point fighting, but he had a full contact group that he was, training with and teaching, and they would go to these, not tournaments, but full contact fights. And I would tag along, and I would be like, okay, I want to spar, but I don't want to spar like that. I would see guys, with their noses broken and people, one of our guys, one time we went to over in Dalton, Georgia, went to a competition. One of our guys, I guess, beat like their hometown favorite or whatever. And people were throwing beer bottles in the ring, and we had to run to our car pretty much, getting jumped in the parking lot kind of thing. So my dad kind of came from the blood and guts era of martial arts where they, because when my dad got his black belt, I mean, they would spar without pads. I mean, you would just put a piece of tape across your knuckles or something, and they did the point fighting back then was pretty strong. And so I just kind of grew up around it and just going to the studio every week and, learning the forms and weapons. And we did a little bit of everything. Like, a lot of people kind of crack jokes on people that break boards and things. They think that's kind of for kids. But I mean, the way we did it, I mean, we were doing boards and bricks and river rocks. I mean, we were doing like some pretty advanced demonstrations. And I remember one of our demonstrations we did here in our town, there was a skating, it was called the Skate Castle, and it opened up. And I remember doing a demo there like on their opening night, and probably 2,000 people there. And, I still have the old VHS tape, I'm kind of old school. So I still have some of the old tapes and things like that of, us doing demos and tournaments. But it's probably more the tournaments than anything else, because my dad was always going, he had a tournament of his own. So he was going to everybody else's tournament because he was like, if you don't go to their tournament, they're not going to come to yours. So he would, we would go all over and compete. And so I kind of got the tournament bug. I really enjoyed the competition, and I competed in forms fighting and weapons, but forms mostly. Sparred in a few tournaments, did weapons at a little more, but forms is what I really gravitated towards. We had one of my dad's top black belts. His name was also Jamie Hooper, and he was ranked number 2 in the nation at one time. He was in all the black belt and Karate Illustrated magazines. Number 1 in the region and things like that. So learned a lot of forms from this guy and weapons and things. And so, he really turned me on to the artistic side of martial arts rather than just the fighting. And so, when I got the gig for the TV show, I didn't really have to learn a lot of, how to act out a punch or take a kick or whatever, because we'd already been doing that for our whole lives, doing demos and fight scenes and, for our demonstration team and stuff like that. So I was pretty natural. I already knew a lot of how to sell, a hit or whatever. So that's just kind of how I grew up. It's always around it. My dad had schools. He would open up branches of schools in like our neighboring towns and things like that. So by the time I got my driver's license at 16, I mean, I would drive to these locations and, lead classes. And I remember at 16 years old, I mean, I don't know how many 16-year-olds my dad let me by myself. He let me drive to Atlanta and do a seminar over there. And I thought I was rich because I did a seminar and made like $300 at Keith Chatham's karate studio and right outside of Atlanta. It seemed like he was in Douglasville or somewhere like that. But, just always going and teaching and taking seminars. And I still do that. Like I just took a seminar this past weekend from Dean Lister, who's probably one of the top 10 grapplers in the world, and got to train with him, did a 3-hour clinic with him. So I've continued studying. Like I've never really stopped. I always tell my students to further their learning and, keep going, learn all you can from anybody you can and things like that. When my dad was doing karate, like the old Korean masters, you couldn't even play music in the studio, much less do like a musical form or a creative form, or you had to do all traditional. But my dad always encouraged me. He's like, hey, look, you have these heroes when you go to these tournaments and you love people like George Chung and Ernie Reyes and John Chung and Keith Hirabayashi and Cynthia Rothrock. He said, you can copy their techniques, like learn. He said, we'll even go and train with these people. So I was 16 years old. My dad took me to Mineola, New York, and on Long Island, and I got to train with John Chung. And so we were always just, going and doing something with martial arts my whole life. It was surrounded. And my mom would be like, every time we'd be over dinner, she's like, can you guys talk about anything else? Because it's always karate all the time. You guys don't talk about anything else. But it was our whole lives. I mean, that's what we did. That was our job,
That's cool. So what was your weapon of choice with the times you competed with weapons?
Yeah, usually the bow staff.
Okay.
I did it like a bow. I never was like a top bow player like a Mike Bernardo or anybody like that, the guys I competed with. But, for local stuff around, I would do a bow form and, I would usually win some local tournaments. But I didn't really venture out and try to, do the bow at any kind of NASCA events or anything like that. I mean, I was good, but I wasn't like that level.
Yeah. Forms
is what I really like to do. I really love the creative forms. I always study traditional forms as well. And I remember one tournament up in Boston. I did a tournament up there, like the New England Open, like in '94. And Kevin Thompson and I, we tied. He had done a traditional form, and I did my creative form, probably the one you saw at the Diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we tied, and they said, okay, you got to do a different form. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do a traditional form. So I did like this wonton, like this tiger claw form. And then he did a creative form. He did like an aerial cartwheel,
Mm-hmm.
and he stumbled a little bit. And maybe if he hadn't have stumbled, maybe he would have beaten me, but he tripped a little bit. And so some of the judges came up to me and said, man, if you had done that form first, you probably wouldn't even have tied. You probably would have won. I'm like, I don't know. Kevin's one of my heroes, because Kevin would do forms, fighting, and weapons. He was always a Triple Crown winner.
Wow.
He would do it all. So, I've just been competing all my life.
That's cool. What, you said when you were 16, you started going and teaching at other schools. So what age did you first start teaching at?
So my dad let me start teaching when I was I got my black belt the summer before I turned 15. So about a year before that, as a red belt, he would let me warm up like some kids classes. Like if we had a beginner kids class or an advanced kids class, I got to lead like some of the exercises and stretching. And then that kind of few months later, I could take a group over to the side and take them through their forms. And before a year passed, I was leading a whole class by myself.
So think back to then. Think back to that first few times you taught for your dad to now. What do you think has changed about your teaching style over the years?
Well, I think one of the reasons, if I'm, any good at teaching, I think it's because my dad started letting me teach so young. That's being a good teacher, you have to have a lot of patience with kids. And I remember teaching these kids, and, I would be like 14, and they would be like, I don't know, maybe like 9 years old. And then, fast forward 20 years, I would have people call me and say, hey, I used to take karate from you. I want to get my child down there with you now. And I would say, well, you probably learned from my dad. You didn't learn probably from me. And they would say, was this Jamie or Jimmy? I said, no, this is Jamie. And they said, no, I took your class. And then I'd find out that I was only like 5 years older than them. And then they're like, I always thought you were so much older. And I'm like, well, when you're 8 or 9 and your instructor's 14, 15, you kind of think that they're older, but, they're not. So, I would just teaching and, one of those things where, I always try to do a well-balanced curriculum, like not just do the forms, but I competed with the forms, but we would teach forms, sparring, weapons, board breaking, self-defense. But now I've kind of got my curriculum. I don't want to say I've got it, down to a science, but we do this thing. I haven't seen other schools do it, but I have a thing where I line the kids up. They're on these marks. We have little, it looks like a wolf, like a paw print. It looks like a wolf print.
Nice.
And they're like 6 feet apart. So in our school, we have a pretty small school. I've got 5 rows of 5, so we can fit like 25 kids in there comfortably. But if you're on the first row, that typically means you've been there the longest. You're a higher belts line up in the front. So like the first kid will bow us in. The second kid have this little bell that's from Korea. So the second kid, his or her job is to come up and ring the bell. The third kid's job is you lead laps around the perimeter of the mat. So you're the leader and you call out, okay, everybody run sideways, everybody skip or run backwards or whatever. And then they do that 5 or 10 laps. And then the fourth kid's job, they do something called animal crawls. That's something that I've been watching like videos with Ido Portal for probably a good 10 years now. So some of the animal, back then everybody kind of knew how to do a bear crawl or a crab walk or whatever, but we've kind of expanded that out to where we're doing like the flamingo and the scorpion and, the lizard or whatever. So if you're the fourth kid, you pick an animal crawl that everybody has to copy your animal crawl that you've chosen. So everybody goes down the mat doing a rabbit or a frog or whatever they're doing exercise. And there's a lot of kids nowadays, when I was a kid, all kids were out, especially in the summer. You were out all day. You were running and riding your bike and climbing trees and building forts. And now a lot of kids are kind of like, I don't know, like house cats or something. They sit in the air conditioning, play video games, and, they're just, or if they're in school, they're sitting in a school desk, 7 hours a day. And, by the time they're in high school, they can't even touch their toes. They're just, really stiff. And so I try to get these kids moving with some animal crawls, using muscles that they don't normally use. And then if you're on the fifth job, we always say that the fifth job is the most important because they have to come up to the front, stand with the teachers and the assistant instructors, and they have to do what we call the key concepts. So we have words on the wall above our flags, words like respect and discipline and focus and attitude. And there's like 16 of these key concepts. The fifth person's job, they get to lead the key concepts, but they can pick a movement to do the concepts too. So they could punch, lead punches as they recite the concepts, or kicks, or jumping jacks, or crunches, or whatever. And so usually the five jobs take about 7 minutes or so. So it's kind of our little warm up that we do. Mm-hmm. And kids just cannot wait to, earn a few belts and finally get to be on the first row, or they pray for a small class to where they, haven't been on the first row before. And today's their first day to get to lead, the animal crawls, or it's their first day to, lead the key concepts or whatever. So that's kind of something that I've done here probably in the last probably 4 or 5 years, where they do those jobs. And then once the jobs are completed, we usually have what's called a mat chat, where I'll pick a word and I'll give them an example of how you would use this word in your life, whether it's on the mat or at home or at school, how you would use perseverance or patience, when you're off the mat or whatever. So we have a little mat chat. Then we get back to some more physical movements. We usually pick some type of exercise, either a push-up variation or some stretching, just a couple of minutes on each one of those. I used to, when I was a young teacher, in my 20s or whatever, I felt like their base flexibility wasn't where it should be. So I'm stretching them for 20 minutes or whatever. And my dad was like, Jamie, you can't, when people are paying for lessons, they can stretch at home. You need to motivate them to stretch at home, because you don't want them half their class being just stretching. Yep. You want to make sure you're doing technique where because if you stretch half the class, how are you going to have time to fit in a couple of topics like, a weapon or a board break or a sparring match or a grappling match or whatever. So now I've kind of got the exercise and stretching. They do their little warm-up jobs for about 7 minutes, and then we probably do an exercise or a stretch for another 5-10 minutes, and then you have the majority of the class, a good solid half hour to focus on a couple topics. And I have been guilty probably of trying to fit too much into a class. Yep. Trying to fit in a lot of topics. So now we've kind of got our curriculum down to where they're doing forms every week. It's just not every single class. Okay. I rotate the curriculum around. So, if they do forms like a other location, sometimes they just, every Wednesday they're doing weapons. And I'm trying to encourage them that, if your weapons are every Wednesday, what if you have a kid that can't come on Wednesday? They either have church or they have scouts or they have some other, conflict that they can't be there. I said, they never get to practice the nunchaku or the bow or anything like that. So we have it now where I kind of rotate that around. So they may do, kicks and forms on one day, and the next day it might be sparring and self-defense, and the next day to be grappling. But then the next week it kind of flip-flops around. So if you did kicks and forms on a Monday, the next week it may not fall to a Tuesday or a Thursday or something. And that way every kid gets everything. So by the time they roll around to their belt test, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, whatever belt they're going for, they've done everything multiple times. So I've noticed that, in the past where some kid may be going for their orange belt and they have to break a board and they're like, I'm supposed to test on Friday. I haven't broken a board since I've joined up. Like I don't know what to do. Oh, wow. So now with this curriculum now, they will have several opportunities each week to do that. And so by the time the belt test rolls around, they've done it enough that they feel comfortable and confident. That's probably one thing that's kind of, evolved over the years of teaching and trying to make it streamlined where they can, because back in the day when my dad would teach self-defense, it was all wasn't all one-step sparring or anything like that, but it was a lot of that. And my dad would show like a move, and he was kind of old school. Like if he taught you a one-step sparring technique and then he had to take a call or go talk to a parent in the office, if he came back out 10 minutes later, you'd better still be practicing the exact same thing. You can't change it. And so I've got a self-defense set that I created where I took all of the different ways that you could be attacked, whether it's like a beginner wrist grab. Not that that's probably a low percentage that somebody's going to attack you by grabbing your wrist, but we start with something basic like that a white belt can learn, and then escape a chokehold, and then, how to handle if somebody's trying to take you down, and so this set is more like a form. It's like a self-defense form, because the problem that I saw on the one steps was my dad would show a different technique, seemed like every other class. And by the time somebody tested 4 months later, he had covered a couple of dozen techniques. Like you should know, how to do a takedown, like a roundhouse takedown, or block a punch, or get out of this hold or whatever. And then we would get on tests and say, okay, you've learned 15 different self-defense techniques. Show us your favorite 5 techniques. Now, if they were blue belt or whatever, they could do it. But like if it was on a yellow belt test, they would do like 1 or 2 moves and then kind of stand there and stare at each other. Like they wouldn't continue. They just couldn't think of any. They just, tests, people are nervous too. And like nothing would come to mind. And so I thought, well, to fix that problem, what we're going to do is we're going to have this set where if you're going for your white belt, a quote unquote bad guy's going to, grab your arm, you're going to escape, and they're going to do a choke on you. You're going to escape. Then they're going to swing a right haymaker at you, and you're going to slip underneath and do a back take. But then when you go for your yellow belt, you're going to pick up from where you left off at the orange belt. You're going to learn how to, if somebody tries to pick you up, how to anchor the leg, how to set down your base and do like a knee bar. And then the person that got taken down from that's going to learn how to escape that and do like the correct, like technical stand up. And so we would just link these moves together. So now all the kids know where the chapter breaks are. They're like, okay, I know at the end of green belt, I'm doing the second technical stand up. And I know for my blue belt, it's going to end with a roundhouse takedown. And so they can do this self-defense set from white to black belt. They can link together 52 moves back to back to back instead of getting up there and staring at each other after they've done 2 things.
Right.
They can get up there and do 50 things. So it's really made that better. And then, you always get some that will say, well, yeah, but the person's not going to attack you in that order. So I will show them that, let's say the first 3 are wrist grab, defense, choke defense, and somebody's going to do a haymaker slap at you. So I'll get a student that's been there for a while, and I'll do it out of order. I'll like grab their arm, but instead of choking them second, I'll just go ahead and swing at them like it's the 3rd move. And they always duck under and take the back just like they're supposed to. Because I tell them, like, if you get attacked, they're not always going to grab with their right hand. They're not always going to kick with their right leg. It may be, so we have to learn it both sides. Mm-hmm. So, but that's kind of one change that I've made is the self-defense curriculum, because my dad always said that the self-defense is like the backbone of martial arts, that you can know all these fancy kicks and forms and twirling a weapon and breaking a board, but that doesn't mean you can really defend yourself. And even some people that can spar pretty well, or maybe they do like no-gi jiu-jitsu and they're grappling. But if you did a move where you say, okay, what if somebody came up behind you and, got you off balance, put you in a chokehold? A lot of them don't know like basic self-defense, or like, how to handle a lapel grab, or, if somebody's got you pinned up against the wall, what if they have you pinned up against the wall? Or what if they have you down on the ground? Like, so my self-defense set has it's like a broad brush where if you learn it from white to black belt, and it even goes further than that, we have like a 2nd degree set and 3rd degree and so forth, that if you do that, you're going to learn everything from like, how to sweep somebody from your guard. You're going to learn how to do an arm bar, a paintbrush, an omoplata, a triangle choke. You're going to learn all these skills where, 20 years ago, the kids, they couldn't do that.
Right.
They couldn't remember it all. But now that I teach it like a pattern, they do it great.
I love that. That's a really good idea. If you have any videos of that, you'll have to send me a link, because it'd be cool to see some
Absolutely.
of that.
So we're actually about to launch. We have one more video to shoot, and our curriculum will be complete as far as for our, a lot of our videos go up on the platforms, TikTok and, YouTube or whatever. And then we were starting our website, and then I had a homeschool class I was actually teaching. And I always ask the parents, hey, what kind of work do you do? And most, people, I'm police officer, firefighter, doctor, nurse, or whatever. But I have this one dad who's bringing his kid to homeschool class, and which is also something I didn't offer until just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But I do a homeschool class, and this dad, he goes, well, I create apps for businesses. I'm like, okay, I want like a martial art app where people can click on my app. They can click on whether they want to learn, once they get into the app, they can click on the kicking part, self-defense, any kind of topic you can think of that we offer. It's gonna have that on there.
That's cool.
And so we're just about ready to launch that. And that way a student can get on the app and learn just a tremendous amount, because they'll see the basics they have to know for their belt, but then they can also go into a section of the app where they can learn, like, let's say they were wanting to learn the kicks for their first belt. So we do orange, and they have to do a front kick and a roundhouse kick. And so, we'll demonstrate like a little 3-minute lesson. This is how you chamber your knee. This is how you curl your toes back, and, show kicking a little paddle, a little paddle target or a heavy bag or something. This is how you do your roundhouse, 3 minutes. But then you can also delve deeper into it. So like if you want like an hour clinic on the first 5 kicks of martial arts, you can click in there and do our first 5 kicks of what we teach, basically front, round, side, hook, and maybe like a crescent kick or an axe kick or something. You can go in there and you can spend an hour and have like a full on clinic. Like you can do, so if we're teaching a self-defense, you can see it demonstrated, takes 30 seconds. You can see it explained, quick explanation, 2-3 minutes. But then if you want to click on and say, I want to learn all the fine details, like all the little micro movements of this move, we may do a seminar where you learn like an arm bar. The person defends that, you go into a triangle choke, person defends that, you go into you do arm bar and then omoplata, then a triangle, that particular sequence. And we may spend an hour and a half working on just those 3, about exactly how to move your hip, exactly where to place the opponent's arm, exactly how to control their head, so that they're learning the finest details. Hopefully, the goal is just to make better students, where if they go to any school, like I've had some of my black belts travel. One of my black belts, Greg Woodruff, he's been working out west, and he'll go into a Muay Thai school, or he'll go into a jiu-jitsu school, and he always calls me and say that they really praise him and say, where did you learn? You're so well-rounded. You can do all the, kicks and, self-defense, and no matter what we do, grappling, whatever, they always hold their own. And one of my other black belts, Mr. Pat Underwood, he's been working on a live action show where it's like a superhero show. I guess we have like Marvel, you have Spider-Man. And anyway, he's like second string for Spider-Man. I think he's first string for a character called Iron Fist. He just got that gig just a few months ago. So he's been training for that. They've been showing him how to do falls from like 20 feet up, how to do wire gags and things like that. Nice. And so he leaves. He's back now, but he's going to leave in another month, and he's going to be gone for 1 year. And he'll be performing like in Dubai, Philippines, Saudi Arabia. Like he's traveling the world with this live action show. And he calls me and he's like, Sabanim. That's what they call me in Korean,
Yep.
Sabanim, they have me leading kicks already. They see all my techniques, and they already have me like leading groups. He said, because some of these performers are, gymnasts. Some of them are, stunt people or whatever. And he said, but when it comes to the kicking part, they put me in charge and I get to lead all of that.
That's cool.
And so it makes me feel proud as a teacher to say, hey, Pat or Greg or whomever, my top black belts can travel, train at these studios, train at these, big productions. Like this is a full-on production with this live action show. And like they've already put him in charge of one of the, some of the routines and choreography. He's like, Sabanim, you did your TV show back when I was 8 years old, and it seemed like you were gone for like a year, and it was only like 2 or 3 months, but it seemed like you were gone forever. He said, now I'm doing the same thing that you did pretty much. He said, I'm on, a show. And so it makes me feel proud that what I teach can carry on, like a legacy, so to speak.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. Congrats on that. So you mentioned the show. Just kind of talk about how did that come about? Did you find out about it and go audition? Did they see you in tournaments and say, hey, we want you on the show? Kind of how did WMAC Masters happen for you?
Yeah, so I was competing pretty heavily in '94. Had a really good year. Leading up to that, I guess early 90s, 91, 92, 93, right in there, I would go and compete, and I would always get like 4th and 5th. And one time I got a 3rd, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, I got 3rd place. It's so awesome. And I was always doing the Korean division. It wasn't traditional, but it was pretty much Korean style. But I could do a lot more than that. Like I could do like kip ups and back tiger dives and like kind of like Jackie Chan stuff, like a lot of kip ups and back tiger dives and things. And so I had this creative form, but I was always like wanting to stay with the tradition because I really liked. I liked it all, but I really wanted to rank up or be, recognized as winning the Korean division. And so in '94, I was like, I think this is going to be my last year. I'm going to compete one more year. And if I don't do better than third, I'm just going to quit. I'm not going to quit karate. I'm going to teach forever, but I'm going to quit spending $700-800 every 6 weeks going to a tournament because I was spending, airfare and hotel and food and entry fee. And I was just like, I'm going to college and working 2 jobs and barely training, but, teaching all the time. But it's just one of these things where I was just like, if I don't have like a breakthrough year, I think I'm just going to wrap it up or whatever. I'm kind of just done with that competing part of my life. But anyway, this '94, I started out, did a tournament out in Irvine, California, outside of LA, I think. And so I switched over to the American forms division. And I always felt like that was an oxymoron, like American karate. Like, is there really such a thing? Like, I don't know. But I thought, I'm just going to give it a shot. So I competed in the American division. There's only 10 of us. I think I got first draw. I had to go first, which is if you compete in forms, you always want to go towards the end or especially last, unless you have seeds and you can't. But I had to go first. I'm not going to win anything going first. I'll probably whatever. So they called out like 8th place and kept going up. And then they called out 4th and it wasn't me. Like I usually get 3rd and it wasn't me. I was like, this is it. I'm done. Called out 2nd. They called out 1st. They said, Jimmy Webster. I literally looked to my right and to my left thinking,
another Jimmy Webster.
Like at 1st place. So I went up there and got my little slip and they gave me, you go pick up your trophy. And then I go back to the tournament hotel. I was in the tournament hotel. I go upstairs in my room. I lie down, watching TV. Can't believe that I got 1st place. Just can't believe it. And then I sat straight up in the bed and I thought, holy crap, I have to compete tonight on stage. Like I've made it to it didn't even dawn on me. Are you going to be competing tonight?
Wow.
Like you're going to be competing. Oh, and you don't even have music, by the way, dummy. Like, what are you going to do? And so one of the guys I competed with, he's from our studio. He had gotten like a 4th that day in his division. He did a musical for him. And I said, hey man, I'm going to have to borrow your music. Like I don't have any music. And I said, yeah, I want to borrow your music, since, you won't be needing it. So I'm going to borrow it if that's okay. And so I competed with borrowed music. I'd never done my form to this particular song or whatever, but I did the music and I was so like keyed up. Like my thing was, I just want to compete and not fall down. Like I want to compete, not slip or stumble. Like I just want to nail my routine. And if I don't place or if I don't win grands or I don't expect to, I didn't expect to win the first. So I was like, hey, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just happy to be here. And so when they started calling out the scores, like 9.99, 10 points, 9.99, 10, 10, I didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear it because I was just so keyed up. And so I walked off the stage and a couple other competitors gave me a high five and they said, man, you got it. And I said, I got what? And he goes, you won. And I'm like, one, like, what are you talking about? I said, there's like, you got some 10s, like you won. I'm like, and they called me up grand champion, got the plaque, got the jacket and everything. That was at Empire State National. So that was in, that particular one, I think was in, let's see, might have been Empire. I can't remember.
Okay.
So I can't remember. Anyway, it was the first time I switched over to the American division. I'd won first, didn't expect it, didn't have the music, borrowed music, won the grand champion. But somehow that gave me some confidence of like, okay, you can hang with these guys. Like you have paid your dues. You've been doing this since you were 5 years old. Like you can do it and you can hang and you can win. So I went to the next tournament. I got first again and grand champion. Went to Battle of Atlanta, first and grand champion. I went to Texas Challenge, Al Garza's Texas Challenge in Houston, got first and grand champion. 6 more tournaments. I didn't win any more grands after that, but I got first every single time, like 10 tournaments in a row. But when I was at Battle, Jeff Smith, like the light heavyweight, former light heavyweight kickboxing champion, he said, hey, you need to come with me. Like you need to meet some of these top guys, not competitors, but like tournament promoters. You need to go talk to some of these people. And so started talking to people like Joe Corley and some of the different ones that put on these big tournaments. And I was like, man, I just don't feel like I belong. Like these are all these big shots or whatever. Well, anyway, Pat Johnson, who was the referee in the old Karate Kid movie, first guy to get his black belt with Chuck Norris. And anyway, he was there, and I didn't know, but he was scouting for this new TV show that was called Quest for the Dragon Star. So anyway, he called me and he said, hey, Jamie, this is Pat Johnson from Los Angeles. I'm calling you about the TV show. And I thought it was a crank call. I'm like, this is Johnny. He's like, excuse me. I'm like, this is prank. He's like, no, this is Pat Johnson. And then I realized, okay, this is really Pat Johnson. He said, I saw you compete at a tournament before. He said, I didn't call you. He said, because I thought you might be a little arrogant. And I was like, well, why would you think, like, who told you? I don't understand. He goes, well, when you got through with your form, like you celebrated, like you kind of put both hands up in the air like Rocky and kind of danced around a little bit. And I was just like, well, I didn't mean to come across that way. I said, I try to pride myself on being humble, have humility. I said, but, I guess it was a competition. I'm trying to sell myself, to pump it up or whatever. I said, but, I would really like this opportunity. He said, okay, I want you to come to New York in the morning. And I was like, okay, Mr. Johnson, usually you don't just leave Decatur, Alabama and just like trot by New York City. Like, he goes, we've got an airline ticket waiting on you. He said, you can fly to Huntsville. He said, you can come up here, do audition. If everything goes well, you sign a contract and be on the show. So I go up there. Sure enough, they take me to a karate studio, it's like a kung fu school, I guess. Anyway, they said, do your form. So I started doing my form, and at the particular time, I actually had some inner ear trouble, and I didn't find out what I really had until I was on the show. So I had something kind of, I don't know if it was behind I don't know all the science of it, but something was didn't mess up my balance, but I got really dizzy. Like every time I would do some of my flips and back tiger dives and kip ups, I would finish my form, but I would be like drunk almost. Like I would be the room would be spinning and I could barely keep my balance.
Wow.
So anyway, they said, well, show us some of your moves. So I flip around a little bit and I stopped to kind of get my bearings again. Like, okay, that was awesome. Show us some more. And I would kind of stall around till I got my balance back under me, because I didn't want to like not get the job because I had some kind of medical thing.
Yep.
And so I wait 30, 45 seconds and I flip around again. And they're like, man, that's awesome. Do some more. They said, every time you get going really good, you just stop. And I didn't want to say, well, it's because I got some inner ear trouble. So anyway, they said, okay, great. You got the part. They pulled out a 30-page contract. They said, take this home, show it to your agent, show it to your attorney. And I said, man, I don't have an agent or an attorney. I don't have all this stuff. They said, well, you can just sign if you want to do it. It's a standard deal. So I signed the deal. A couple months later, I'm in Orlando at the Universal Studios, like getting fitted for my costume and like meeting all the other characters. But it was basically, Pat Johnson scouted me and gave me a call, and I showed up and did my thing.
That's so cool. What do you think? I mean, it's because it's kind of making a little comeback. I mean, it's not, it's been the popularity. I mean, it's always been popular, but it's kind of the last year or two, I suppose, with like Chris's book and stuff. And you guys, some of the guys have been going to tournaments and talking about it and stuff. And that's kind of gotta feel pretty cool. I mean, 20 years later.
Sure. I thought, this is one of those things where, 5 years after the show wrapped, I mean, we only filmed for 2 seasons. I mean, we made 26 episodes. And from what I was told, that you do a first season, it's 13 episodes. Second season's 13 episodes. Third season, if there's one, you do 14, because 13 plus 13 plus 14 is 40. Once you hit 40 episodes, they'll start showing the show instead of on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Mm-hmm. They'll start showing it Monday through Friday right after school. Nice. And then it's like a big thing. Well, it never reached that. And so 5 years after the show wrapped, I get a call one day and this guy's like, hey, you remember me from high school? I'm like, oh, of course. And he goes, I'm watching your show right now. And I said, oh, you got like one of the videos? He goes, no, it's on TV. I said, man, that show hasn't been on TV in I said, they show reruns for a couple of years. I said, but it hasn't been on television in 2 or 3 years. And he goes, no, I'm watching it right now. He said, I'm in the military. He said, I'm in Dominican Republic. And he said, you're on TV in Spanish. He said, but your name is still, they'll say Jamie Webster. And he said, I'm in the kitchen and I hear, da 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 da, Jamie Webster. I'm like, I know that name. I know that. He said, I went in there. He said, heck, it's you. I thought I'd call and tell you that you're on TV right now in Dominican Republic. I was like, that is so crazy. And so, all these years later, it's probably, I don't know, probably 3-4 years ago, I get a call or I got a letter, a handwritten letter. Like somebody sat down, wrote a letter, said, hey, I found where, your episodes on YouTube and I'm showing my kids and they wanted me to write you a letter and see if you would send them an autograph or something. So I just thought that is so crazy. 20 years later, they want, autographs. So I sent it to them.
That's
and
awesome.
then just a few years ago, Christopher Landis called. He said, hey, during COVID, he said, I'm a writer. He said, I write novels for my living, for my job. And he said, when I was growing up, he said, your show was one of my favorite shows as a kid. I said, I just absolutely loved it. And he said, I showed it to my kids and he said, they love it. And he said, I thought, I'm going to write a behind the scenes novel. He said, I'm going to call all these actors and producers and directors and interview them over the phone. Let them tell stories just like I'm telling you. And he said, I'm going to put it into a book form. And he said, see what it does. So he wrote the book and then he would call me, it seemed like, every week or two he'd call, we'd talk, for 45 minutes or an hour and he'd jot down all the stories. And then the book came out and he's like, hey, I'm doing a book signing. Would you want to come to Washington, D.C. at Dennis Brown's Capitol Classics? There's another tournament, which I had won.
Mm-hmm.
They used to hold it every August and it was in August. So he's like, hey, I'm going to be there. You want to come up? He said, Willie the Bam Johnson's going to be there. He said, so-and-so, supposed to be there. Well, we get there and it's me and Willie the Bam, Christine Bannon Rodriguez, Lady Lightning, and then it was Hakeem, the Machine.
Yep, Alston.
So got to see all these people, and again, which is so cool. And so got to sign some books for some people. I actually brought my my costume. I still have my costume from the show.
Oh, wow.
They had 2 costumes, so in case one got ripped, you just put on another one. And so I was competing somewhere doing a seminar, and I said, so these people want to take pictures. And I said, can I have one of my costumes just to do pictures? And then, I can bring it back with me when we do season 3. Well, there never was a season 3. And so they never asked for it back. And so
Nice.
I still have it. Matter of fact, my son Grayson, one year when he's still a big dude, Grayson's a good sized man. But when he was like, I don't know, 11 or something, one of his last years trick or treating, he wanted to wear my costume. So I let him wear the costume to go around trick or treating.
That's cool.
But so I still have it. And I brag that I have the largest WMAC Masters collection in the world, because when I got back home, started teaching again, I was kind of like a hometown hero, like a celebrity. And even me and my kids, we would travel. We would go to, take my kids to the mountains or take them to the beach or whatever. And just about every time we would go to a Cracker Barrel to eat or go somewhere, go to anywhere, we'd go into a grocery store. Somebody would see me and go, you're Jamie Webster. You're the Great Wolf. And my kids would be like, everybody knows you, Dad. That's so crazy. I'm like, well, I can't believe that they know me, because that show has not been on in years. And I don't know how they remember this and because I look so different now, because I look, everybody's so much older and, but anyway, people still would recognize me or whatever. But when I came back home from the show, I would go to KB Toys in our mall. And if they had a shipment of WMAC Masters in, I would just buy the whole box.
Nice.
I would buy, I see these on eBay. I see these WMAC Masters dragon belts, and they're like $100 or $300. I'm like, nobody's going to pay that for that. Plus, I have a box of a dozen. Like I have the whole box that's never been opened.
Wow.
And I have boxes of the arena multiples. Like I have probably 3 or 4 arenas never been opened. All the play sets never been opened. Action figures, tapes, Halloween costume. Books, anything that came out, anything and everything. I have multiple copies. And so the only figure that I don't have is Panther. And I saw someone I don't know if it was a prototype or if they only released like a few, because his was one of the ones they didn't release very many. I've seen one person that has it, and Grayson, my son, contacted them and said, hey, would you sell it? to complete my dad's collection. It's like, no, I don't want to sell it. He's like, if you ever decide to sell it, please let us know first, because my dad was on the show and he wants to complete the collection. I even have one of my figures. It's the craziest thing. It's not my figure. It's Mike Bernardo's figure. Mm-hmm. So it's turbo. But the header card, like the figure's in a sealed, like it's got a card on the back and a little plastic cover. So the figure under the plastic is Mike Bernardo. The header card is my header card. So it was a mistake. And it hasn't been tampered with. So you could tell it wasn't like somebody put it together or what. It just came from the factory like that.
That's cool.
And it was on eBay. It was on eBay for $5. And so I'm one of these nerdy guys that I'll get on there, I don't know, every 3 or 4 months, and I'll just type in WMAC Masters, see if there's anything new for sale that I don't have. And I saw that on there. I'm like, I'm getting that. It's only $5. And so I got it, and it's an error. So I feel like, well, that's probably worth more than that. So I got I've got my costume. I've got pretty much anything to do with the show. I have like my card that I had to I have all the scripts, like every script that we ever did. I have all the scripts. So I saved everything. And a little pack rat on that kind of stuff. So I have everything from the show.
That is so cool.
It was my first gig. So I was like, I may not ever get this opportunity again. So I'm going to, save everything. So I have it all in my man cave. Some of it's hanging on the wall and stuff like that down in my pool table room. So, if people come over, and it's funny, like when Grayson and Daniel were probably, I don't know, maybe 13, 14, they would have friends over. And as they would come down the basement stairs to play pool, as they're walking down the stairs, they would say, hey, listen, I want to apologize. My dad's kind of nerdy. He's got all this Star Wars crap, and he's got WMAC, the show he was on. He's got all this vintage stuff all hanging around, and it's kind of stupid. And as soon as the kid would get down there, they would go, oh, my goodness, my dad would have a fit if he saw this. This is amazing. He has every figure there's ever been. He has all the Star Wars 12-inch figures and all the Star Wars, And so they were apologizing that how the man cave looked, but yet the kids found it to be just the opposite, how amazing and cool it was.
That's so cool.
So I said, see, your old dad is not as, out of touch as you would think. Like your friends think it's cool. You're the one that thinks it's, stupid or whatever. So, but all those, so, I when I did the book signing, I got a call from, I got a lady that worked on the show. She was like an assistant. On a show, you have a director, and then you have like assistant director, and then you have like an assistant to the assistant. So this person, basically assistant to the assistant, they just make sure everybody has their scripts. They bring people coffee or whatever. They're just kind of, you start out like that. But then now you fast forward 25 years, this person has shows on Netflix and things like that. So I called Shannon, and I'm like, hey, this book's out, and, I don't know about the rest of the athletes. I said, but I've kept my shape pretty good. I still train and teach. And I said, I hear there's a buzz about like a remake show. And she goes, well, they're just waiting on a couple of producers. Like, a show like that's going to be, tens of millions of dollars to pay, when you have a cast like that, you're paying not just the cast, but directors and all the, ad spots and stuff or whatever. She said, as soon as we get the funding, we're looking at doing at least a cast reunion show. Cause I first said, I said, I don't know. I said, I've kept my shape. I said, but even though I said, I don't know too many people that want to tune in to see like 50-year-old fat boys fighting or whatever. Like I don't think we'll be, I'm in good shape for a 50-year-old, but I'm not in shape like I was. And she goes, no. What we would do, she said, it would be WMAC like grandmasters. Like you guys would be training these young recruits, and y'all would have cameo appearances in there, and you would be like teaching instead of like fighting. But there would be moves you would do, but it would be more like on that level. I'm like, well, I'm down. And so at the time for the past 20 years, I've had a short haircut. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to grow my hair out for this. She's like, you don't have to do that. She said, we can do like a wig or extensions and it would look good. And I said, no. If I do anything, it's like legit and real. Like I'm going to grow my hair out. So for the past 2 years, haven't got a haircut. But I told my wife, I said, if nothing materializes in the next 12 months, I'm cutting all this mess off. But I've been growing my hair out, hoping and wishing and praying and magic bean buying. So I cannot wait if it happens. And if it doesn't happen, I'm cool with that too. Like I'm at peace either way. I enjoy what I do, teaching kids. So if it happens, great. And, if it doesn't, I'm still proud of how everything turned out with the book. And, getting to meet Christopher Landis, owe him a big debt because, I probably bought I have the same thing like I did with my figures. I probably bought, a big box of 30 books,
Wow.
all that's going to be signed and everything like that, just to, just to be able to have them. And if, I have someone I can gift them to or whatever, I have them. So you send me your address and I'll sign it. If you don't already have one, if you don't have a signed copy, I'll
Oh,
send you one.
wow. I appreciate that. Thank you. I actually love it. I don't have one yet, so I would love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You just, when we get off, you can just, text me your address or whatever. I'll hook you up.
Wow. Thank you very much. So now you've been in martial arts most of your life. You took a little break and stuff, but so in all your years of martial arts, is there one philosophy you've learned that rises to the top? You keep coming back to it. It's super important to you.
Well, I guess if I could pinpoint it down to anything, I don't want people to see me as like one dimensional, that I'm just, the karate guy in town or whatever. Like I try to pride myself in being a good dad and, not just a karate teacher, but, because if I spend all this time at the dojo working with other people's children, that I love doing that job. I love teaching the kids about respect and discipline and seeing them, martial arts is great that it will give you whatever you are looking for. If you need to drop a few pounds, it will help you there. If you're kind of on the slender side and you need to kind of get a little more muscle, it will help you there. If you don't have a lot of friends, you will make friends when you come to the dojo. If you're a little too cocky and you need to be brought down a notch or two, there's someone at the studio that's going to be able to kind of help you there too, to be more humble. And so if you're looking for confidence, if you've been bullied, whatever it is, martial arts will give you what you're looking for. And that's probably, the biggest thing that I've seen martial arts do for people over the years is it will help them it will take a good person, make them a better person, take a person who's shy, make them a little more outgoing, so it really helps people. And, if I just teach them like punching and kicking, like I tell my students often, like when you learn all these moves, like it's easy to hurt people. Like what you want to do is help people. Like you want to help people because basically if there's any kind of secret to life, it's that good people do things for other people. That's it, the end. Like that's how you are going to be a success, not by what you drive or what what kind of house you live in or anything like that. But it's, are there going to be cool stories to tell about you later? Like, try to live your life like that. So if there's anything I can do, it's just helping a kid. But on the same token, if I spend all my time at the dojo helping these other kids and neglect my own kids and not be a good dad, then I've still failed, even though I've had a good success in training. I've got 140 kids at that one location. I could train them, but if I lose my own in pursuit of martial arts that I love, then I've really failed as a parent. So balance, I guess, I spend a lot of time at the dojo because that's my job. My kids understand that, but we also have time where we're together, where we're taking trips to the mountains or we're going to the beach or we're, doing things that we hang out as a family. So just, balancing your life that's probably the biggest thing that's helped me, not just, balancing when you're kicking, but just balancing with your life.
That's a great answer.
Because the things that's important to me was not so important to me when I was like 25 years old. Like now that I'm 52 years old, things like, good sleep and good healthy food and good fresh air and sunshine and good, things like that. Because when you're young, you're trying to, you're working hard, you're building your family, you're working yourself to death, trying to, people that work themselves to death trying to get a bigger house or a bigger boat or something like that. Mm-hmm. I just see that as, you're just chasing your tail, so to speak. So it's like, I think just try to be happy, like wherever you are. Mm-hmm. You got to find some happiness there. You don't have to try to, because a lot of people will tell you, like if some of these big celebrities that have big mansions and big, houses in other countries, all over the place, some of these people are the most miserable people you ever meet because they realize that money doesn't fix all that. Right. Like you're still at the end of the day, you're kind of, so you have to be happy from the inside, and just embrace life as it is. I mean, if people feel stressed out, I mean, heck, go to the beach and get some rays or something. Like go, just chill out. Some people take it way too serious. So, just
Hmm.
having fun with it, not achieving happily, but happily achieving. So just try to be happy along the way.
Nice. I like it. All right. I got a few fun questions to wrap it up here. Doesn't have to be 4 names. It can be, I've had as few as 2 and as many as 8. So it's up to you. Just who are some names that you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Okay. All right. So I would have to pick people like, well, my dad, of course.
Nice. Yep.
Do my dad. Then I would do like the first time that I kind of got introduced to some bigger name. Well, actually, before Jeff Smith introduced me to people like Pat Johnson, there was a guy named Ken Eubanks, and he and his son
Yes.
Marty put on the Bluegrass Nationals in Kentucky, in Louisville. They did that forever, and Marty's still hosting events, I think, in Bowling Green. But anyway, so I would go to these tournaments, and I was working 2 jobs, and just struggling to pay the $700 or $800 to go to these national events. And I would enter the forms division. They would shuffle the little cards and decide who goes first. And it seemed like every single tournament I was going first. It was almost like it was rigged against me, even though I know it wasn't. I didn't take it personally. I was just like, this is unbelievable. I had to go first last tournament. I'm going first today. Next time, I got to go first again. Well, I forget where we were. It wasn't at his, I don't, it was, he was judging. So he was the center judge. And he shuffled the cards. I saw him shuffling behind his back, and he pulled out a card. And he happened to look up and look right into my eyes. I was standing on the line with the other competitors, and so he looks up, and we made eye contact. And I saw him take that card and move it to the bottom of the pile. And I knew what he had done. I knew I drew first again, and then he put my card on the bottom so that I could go last. And so I got to go last on this, and I actually won. I got a first or a second or something like that. And so again, if he hadn't have done that, I don't know if I eventually got discouraged or whatever. Probably, my
Hmm.
dad, Jeff Smith, for introducing me to Pat Johnson, Ken Eubanks, a guy named Greg Silva.
Hmm.
Greg Silva sponsored me in 1994. He called my dad. He said, "Hey, I saw Jamie compete last year." And he said, "I'm sponsoring 10 people, and I'm going to pay their airline ticket, their hotel, their entry fee, and any money they win, they get to keep it." And he said,
Wow.
"I want to sponsor your son to be on Team United Professionals." And had he not sponsored me, I probably would have stopped competing because I was just I was struggling. I mean, you're talking about back in the 90s, I was working at a place part-time after college, making like $6 an hour or something like that back in the day.
Yep.
And so I was just like, it was just so Mr. Silva sponsored me, and I was able to afford, because it didn't cost me anything. He paid everything. And so I got to go to all 10 NASCA tournaments that year in 94, and he sponsored me to go. It didn't cost me anything. So I would put him there for sure. You got your icons you look up to, like, in the movies and stuff, whether it's Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or somebody like that. But just people in my personal life, that's the ones I would name.
Okay. How about a favorite martial arts book?
Favorite martial art book? I would say This Is Karate by Masayama.
Great book. All right. How about a favorite martial arts video game? Were you ever into video games in the 80s, 90s when you were younger?
So in my pool table room in my man cave at one time, right now I have a Galaga Miss Pac-Man combination stand-up arcade. But back in the day, I had a Mortal Kombat 2 fighting game.
Sweet.
And I had stand-up. I had it on free play. I had all the cheat codes, so I memorized that. So if you came over and challenged, like, I could do all the ending moves and do like
Nice.
the fatalities and babalities and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I had the Mortal Kombat 2. That's probably actually, now I go back to the old arcade games where, let's see. So when I was probably maybe 15, 16, you could go to the mall, and they had still had arcades back then in our town, in our mall. And they had a game called Karate Champ. I remember playing Karate Champ, and I've been wanting to get one of those games. I've got a video arcade connection where this guy can get you a game for, I guess like a brand new Pac-Man costs you $4,000 or something, but this guy builds them from scratch, and he can get you one for like, $700-800. So it's still pretty pricey, but it's not like 3,000 or 4,000.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get it to where you can have all the fighting games on one. like because the Galaga Miss Pac-Man combo that I have
Mm-hmm.
has like 60 games on it, so it has all these different games, and you
Yep.
just scroll through and pick the one you want to play. So it looks old, it looks vintage, but it's actually the insides are like a new computer.
Yeah.
But I want a fighting game just like that, where it has all the old vintage like Tekkens. And
That'd be cool.
the first time that when I went to the TV show, we didn't have to work. The first day I got there, we just kind of like go do whatever. And I remember meeting a couple of the other characters. It was well, I'd known Johnny Smith, but it was Johnny and he and Nguyen, and it was Eric Betts. And we all go eat together, and then we all go to an arcade and we fight each other in Tekken. And that was always a good memory for me. So
That's awesome.
probably the old Mortal Kombat's stand-up arcade game, Tekken, and probably Karate Champ from like the 80s.
Okay, that is cool. Great answer. All right, now this one you can't pick WMAC Masters, obviously. Favorite martial arts TV show?
TV show. Okay. Well, I would probably go back. I've watched some of the episodes recently, and they're good. They're good. But I remember them being like, I just could not wait to watch them when I was like 13 years old. But I used to like the old David Carradine Kung Fu.
Okay. Yep.
I enjoyed that. Yeah. So, because I'm kind of old school, like, a lot of people say, Power Rangers or something like that. But I was a little older when that stuff was coming out.
Yeah.
Like, Kung Fu and stuff was back. I grew up on movies like Billy Jack and,
nice,
stuff like that. And I remember one of my first instructors, it was a black belt under my dad, I mentioned earlier, Jamie Hooper. He would get Jackie Chan movies. As we're not talking about stuff like Rush Hour and Shanghai Nights or whatever. This stuff that he did, like Fearless Hyena and things like that back in the day. He would get a hold of these movies, and they would be in Chinese, and the subtitles at the bottom would be in a different dialect of Chinese.
Wow.
So we're watching these movies of them speaking in Mandarin or whatever, but the subtitles at the bottom was Cantonese or whatever. I don't know the exact ones, but like, we didn't watch it for the acting. We watched it because it seemed like in those movies, every 5 minutes, there's another 10-minute fight scene.
Yep.
5 minutes of acting and then 10 minutes of fighting. So we would watch all of those at my dad's house, like it's on like a VCR, like an old tape, but it would be Jackie Chan in Chinese speak, and the subtitles would be in another dialect.
That's
and we would just watch those. That was just awesome to me that my instructor would come over to our house.
All right. How about then? You mentioned movies. Favorite martial arts movie?
Oh, Last Samurai.
Nice. That's a great. That one's only been picked a couple times. That's a good pick.
So Last Samurai is one of those movies where for some reason I went to see it by myself, like some loser. I go see it all alone. For some reason I went to see this by myself. I don't know what because usually go to movies, you have family or you got a bunch of friends, and there's, at least 4, 5, 10 people. Everybody goes, fills up a row. This particular movie, for some reason, I went by myself, and I watched that movie, and I left walking out thinking to myself, you're not a real martial artist. Like, you're just some joker player. Like these people had real code, like honor, like Bushido. They had like the real warrior code. And like, that's the real martial arts. And so that movie really changed my trajectory, because looking at an actor like Tom Cruise, most of these actors like Ralph Macchio and people like that, they spent like 3 months. And you can tell, like, if you watch the original Karate Kid, he was an actor and he was doing his best. Like, he did a great job as a kid, or I guess he was 20 something when he did the Karate Kid, but he looked like, to me, he had been training 6 months or something. Like, he looked like a green belt. That's fine. Well, when I read the article about Tom Cruise, he was going to do the same thing. He was going to work out for 3 or 4 months. And he said he realized that to make this look believable, this is something you couldn't do 3 or 4 months. A real martial artist, it would never be that good. So he said he worked out on these routines for 2 years before they actually shot the stuff. Like, he didn't do it just 3 months like most actors would do and go on to another film. He worked on the sword stuff for 2 years.
That's cool.
And so that kind of inspired me that, wow, this is a real actor that's really wanting to make it look the best. Last Samurai, definitely.
Okay, nice. All right. Final question. This one does not have to be a martial arts movie, just a favorite movie fight scene.
Favorite movie fight scene. Favorite movie fight scene. Well, if it's martial arts, like if it's just fighting, I like some of the old like Rocky 2, something like that, like the Rocky movies and stuff, just for like boxing or something. But for martial arts, I like stuff like like Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx.
Oh, great
That
movie.
was
Yep.
he incorporated a lot of his old school stuff, some of the accidental kung fu, things with bottles and moving the bottles back and forth and grabbing the guy's hand, moving across the pool table, and he did like a 540 kick, like it looked like he did it over a refrigerator or something. Like it was crazy.
Yep.
And so that was probably, I really enjoyed those fight scenes.
Very
with,
cool.
with Jackie Chan and the Rumble in the Bronx. When he worked that the Wing Chun dummy in the beginning, like that was insane.
Yeah.
He's just amazing. He's amazing.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, first of all, before I let you go, anything that I maybe forgot to ask you want to get out there quick, and I'll put links for your school and YouTube channel and everything else out there. And I'll even put links for WMAC Masters on there for people to check out episodes if they've never seen it. Hopefully my listeners have seen it because I've talked about it a lot, but I'll put links for everything out there when the episode comes out. But anything else you want to mention before I let you go?
I can't think of anything. I'm a big talker. I do love to tell stories, and
that's good.
Sometimes I feel guilty that if somebody interviews. And I know you said in the beginning, hey, they want to hear you, not me, kind of thing. But sometimes I do feel like I do ramble on or whatever. But with martial arts and stuff, we've had so many experiences and things in my life that different. Maybe if we do this again, I've got stories I've collected over the years, like funny stories, like things that's happened at tournaments or demos where, people's, something that's just really, really funny.
Okay.
And
I would
so
like that. That could be
if we ever
fun.
do it again, I've got a handful of stories that people, like if I've told one before, I'll have people that we get together like, okay, you've got to tell this person that story. You told me that time about the pseudo chop to the throat. You've got to tell them the story.
Nice.
And so I would tell them that. So if we do it again, maybe because I don't want to ramble on too long and bore your audience, but some of those stories.
I'll keep that in mind. That might be an idea.
They would get a kick out of that. Pardon the pun. They would really love some of the funny stories, especially with my dad, like with people coming into the dojo and like not necessarily dropping a challenge, but my dad was he was so old school that like when he in the late 60s, like he would accompany, like if somebody opened up a dojo, like a dojang in our town, and Master Chung didn't feel like they were teaching, like if they were teaching weak, watered down martial arts, he would just get my dad and they would just go to the studio and just challenge the instructor and like just they would fight on like stuff you hear about in the movies, like they really did it. And so he's like, we're not having these people teach this like junk and crap. Like they're gonna teach good stuff. We're not gonna have this. And so they participate. My dad got to participate in a couple of dojo wars, I guess you would call them. Like,
that's awesome.
The real stuff where they storm a dojo with people not teaching right.
I definitely want to hear more about that sometime. So we'll have to do that. We'll find a time. So cool. But
absolutely.
I just have to thank you. This has been such fun. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I'm so glad we made it happen. And like you said, you're a great storyteller. It's been such a blast hearing about you, and I can't wait till the episode comes out.
Absolutely. Well, let me know when it does. I like to tune in myself. And anytime you want to, if you're near our area or if we can get together and have some dinner or whatever, we can share more stories. So look me up if you're ever close by.
I will keep that in mind. I appreciate it, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, for everything.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.